Hello everyone, and thanks so much for being with us today. I'm Eric Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. The situation in the Middle East turns dire as the fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas breaks down and the war of words escalates between the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen and the United States. We've got the latest on those and other stories right here, but first, the headlines. President Donald Trump says Chinese President Xi Jinping will visit Washington soon amid soaring trade tensions between the world's two largest economies. A plane crashes just off the Caribbean coast of Honduras, killing at least 12 people. The flight departed from Roatan Island, one of the Central American country's main tourist hotspots. Lebanon and Syria agreed to a ceasefire after 2 days of cross-border attacks, which left 10 people dead and more than 50 others wounded. Top diplomats of China, Japan, and South Korea to meet in Tokyo this weekend to promote trilateral cooperation and bolster regional ties. And the Rwanda-backed N23 rebels pull out of peace talks with the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The talks were in fact scheduled for today in Angola. We begin with the latest in the Middle East. Israel launched a massive air assault on Gaza, shattering a fragile ceasefire that took effect just 2 months ago. The overnight airstrikes killed more than 400 people across the Gaza Strip, including children, women, and elderly people. Authorities in Gaza said people were still trapped under the rubble of their homes, bombed by the Israeli forces.
Even during the ceasefire, the occupation did not allow the entry of medical equipment, devices, and very necessary medical consumables to maintain what remains of the health system and functioning hospitals. The occupation has destroyed more than 22 hospitals, and only fewer than 7 hospitals are now operating partially.
Now reports say Israel struck targets in Khan Yunis and Rafah in southern Gaza, Gaza City in the north, and some locations in central Gaza Strip. The Israeli military said it targeted terror locations of Hamas as the Palestinian group has been refusing to release more hostages. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he ordered the strike due to a lack of progress in talks to extend the ceasefire.
The IDF is currently attacking targets of the Hamas terrorist organization throughout the Gaza Strip with the aim of achieving the war goals as determined by the political echelon, including the release of all our hostages, living and dead.
Israel's ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, says the country will show no mercy on Hamas until all captives are in fact released.
The Israeli Air Force initiated a series of attacks against Hamas targets in Gaza. We will show no mercy on our enemies. Let me be very clear. Israel will not stop until all of our hostages are back home. We will make it very clear to the Security Council that if they want to stop the war in Gaza, they have to ensure that the hostages are coming back to Israel. We are committed to bring them back.
Now responding to the devastating strikes, Hamas claimed Israel had put the fate of its remaining hostages in jeopardy.
Benjamin Netanyahu's decision to resume war is a decision to sacrifice the occupation's prisoners and impose a death sentence on them.
Notably, Israel's surprise attack on Tuesday killed several Hamas officials, including a senior member of its political wing. Moreover, the White House confirmed that Israel did in fact consult with President Donald Trump before launching the wave of strikes on the Gaza Strip.
As President Trump has made it clear, Hamas, the Houthis, Iran, all those who seek to terrorize not just Israel, but also the United States of America, will see a price to pay. All hell will break loose.
The latest escalation in Gaza comes amid a standoff in truce talks between Israel and Hamas. Israel wants Hamas to release half of the remaining 59 hostages under the first phase of the three-stage ceasefire deal, which Netanyahu insists should be extended until mid-April. However, Hamas says it would only release the hostages under the second phase that was due to begin earlier this month and would require Israel to negotiate over a permanent end to the war. And staying in the Middle East, the Yemen-based Houthis claim to launch their third attack on American warships in 48 hours despite retaliatory strikes by the United States. The Iran-backed group said it targeted the USS Harry S. Truman aircraft carrier with drones and missiles in the Red Sea. The group says it will continue to target U.S. warships in the region until American and Israeli aggression against Yemen stops.
Over the past few hours, the Yemeni armed forces have successfully targeted the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Harry Truman in the northern Red Sea with 2 cruise missiles and 2 drones, and targeted a U.S. destroyer with a cruise missile and 4 drones. The targeting of the aircraft carrier is the third in the past 48 hours. The Yemeni armed forces affirm that they will not cease targeting all hostile targets in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea until the aggression against our country stops. They are prepared, relying on Allah, to confront any American or Israeli escalation in the coming hours and days.
Meanwhile, President Donald Trump warned that he will hold Iran responsible for any future attacks by the Houthis. And in a post on his social media platform Truth Social, the commander-in-chief said, quote, "Every shot fired by the Houthis will be looked upon from this point forward as being a shot fired from the weapons and leadership of Iran, and Iran will be held responsible and suffer the consequences, and those consequences will be dire," end quote. President Donald Trump added that Iran has been arming the Houthis with highly sophisticated military equipment and intelligence, which it uses to attack foreign vessels in the Red Sea. Now, in response, Houthi rebels rallied thousands of protesters across Yemen on Monday.
It is not new. It is not new what the American aggression is doing against the Yemeni people. We have experienced them, and we experienced their lies, their deception, and their involvement that is just a show, a show. Donald Trump feels that he is threatening the world with his talks and words, but hell, he is the one who will fall into hell, God willing.
The airstrikes that came from the enemies of God, the United States and Israel, were on homes and residential neighborhoods that have nothing to do with our facilities. Secondly, if they struck what they struck, they would only strike the oppressed and the destroyed. They have what to lose, and we have for them hell, the inferno, and the support of God in His resurrection by our hands, the hands of the believers.
Meanwhile, in a letter to the United Nations, Iran criticized President Trump for making quote-unquote belligerent statements. Tehran also accused Washington of unlawfully justifying war crimes against Yemen. Backed by Iran, Houthis have attacked over 100 merchant vessels from November of 2023 to January of this year. The attacks were aimed at expressing support for their Palestinian ally Hamas amid Israel's war on Gaza. Now, the Houthi rebels halted their campaign once a ceasefire took effect in Gaza just 2 months ago. However, last week the Iranian proxy group said it would resume targeting Israeli ships in the region, prompting the U.S. to launch a series of deadly attacks. And now moving to Europe, new Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney met with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris on Monday. The two world leaders discussed ways to strengthen the economic and security ties between Canada and France. And during the meeting, Canadian Prime Minister Carney sought support from Ottawa's oldest allies amid repeated attacks on Canada's sovereignty and economy by President Donald Trump. Prime Minister Carney said Canada is fundamentally different from America and will never, ever, in any way, shape, or form, be part of the United States. He also said President Trump must stop making disrespectful comments about Canada before the two countries can start serious talks about their future ties.
Personally, I've been clear. The ministers behind me, I think to an individual, when asked, have been clear that we will never, ever, in any way, shape, or form, be part of the United States.
President Trump has imposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum and has repeatedly commented on turning Canada into the 51st state of America. French President Emmanuel Macron added that tariffs only bring inflation and damage supply chains. However, he did not address Donald Trump's attacks on Canada specifically. Both allies highlighted the launch of a new bilateral partnership on intelligence and security, however.
I think we both believe that fair trade that respects international rules is good for everyone's prosperity and is certainly more effective than tariffs, which create inflation and damage chains of production and the integration of our economy.
And during their meeting, Carney and Macron also reaffirmed their unwavering support for Ukraine and its ongoing war with Russia.
We both stand for sovereignty and security, demonstrated by our unwavering support for Ukraine under your leadership.
This was Carney's first foreign trip since taking office last week, and after his Paris visit, he'll head to London for talks with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The Prime Minister's choice of itinerary emphasizes Canada's strong connection with the UK and France, Canada's two former colonial powers. But Mark Carney dismissed the notion that he was seeking support from European powers to affirm Canada as a nation.
I think I would take seriously what the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom said today. I don't think one needs to respond to every comment about another country. Look, we can stand up for ourselves. It's Canada strong. We can stand up for ourselves. We've called out those comments. They're disrespectful, they're not helpful, and they need to stop before, and they will have to stop before we sit down and have a conversation about our broader partnership with the United States.
And now it remains to be seen how Canada's new direction will impact relations with its southern neighbor, but what leaves no doubt is that Canada's latest Prime Minister seeks to reaffirm existing ties with key allies. The Netherlands Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans spoke at the Firstpost Ideas Pod at the Raisina Dialogue 2025 in New Delhi. During the conversation, Brekelmans talked about President Donald Trump's decisions testing America's decades-old ties with NATO. The Dutch politician also expressed certainty that Ukraine will have to make some concessions to end the 3-year-long deadly war with Russia. Here's a look at the conversation.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost. We're here on the sidelines of the Raisina Dialogue, and there's one issue that everybody's talking about here, and that's the war in Ukraine and how to solve it. And let's discuss this conflict with my guest right now, the Defense Minister of Netherlands, Mr. Ruben Brekelmans. I hope I got that right.
Perfect.
Thank you. Let's talk about what happened last week in Russia, where the Russian president said he's open to the idea of a ceasefire, but he's got certain clarifications that he wants from the United States. Do you think he's serious about this, or is he just buying time?
We have to wait and see. So far, I haven't seen much willingness from the Russian side and from Putin to compromise. And I think that is important, because if you look at the demands from Putin so far, I think they are unacceptable. They are unacceptable when it comes to Ukraine, and they are acceptable when it comes to the rest of Europe. For example, his requirement or his demand to move around troops in Europe. That's something that we decide on ourselves. It's not something that is for Putin to decide. So let's see if he is serious. I think the ball is in his court. It's important that we put pressure on him, and not only at the negotiation table, but also, for example, by sanctions and by enforcing sanctions. And then let's see how serious he is.
Last year, your country hit the NATO target of 2% of its GDP being set aside for defense. But now the US President Donald Trump is sort of shifting the goalpost. He says, let's spend 5% of our GDP on defense. Is that something the Netherlands is committed to doing going forward?
We are starting now to have these discussions in the Netherlands. We had a new government starting over half a year ago, in which we set the 2% in our budget, also in the longer term. We also just passed a law in our parliament saying that this 2% should also be in our law, so in legislation. And we are now having a discussion, or starting the discussion, on whether to raise our spending. I think there are many politicians and many people in the Netherlands saying that we should increase our spending on defense. But the more difficult question is, how are we going to finance that? And you can do this by either raising taxes or cutting costs or raising the debt level. And of course, all three options are not optimal. So we need to find a compromise there. And that's taking some time because we are talking about serious amounts here. If you move from 2 to 3%, for example, for the Netherlands, that would mean additional budget of 10 to 12 billion every year. And for the Netherlands, that's quite big. So we need to have this political discussion. But I'm hopeful that we will find a solution over the next couple of weeks and months.
President Trump has also been saying that if NATO countries don't spend enough, he's simply not going to defend them, which is not technically what the NATO Charter says. But as a result of that, we've seen a rearmament bid in Europe, with every country setting aside billions of dollars or euros on their defense. Do you think the long-term plan is for Europe to defend itself without any reliance on the United States?
I think it's not that black and white, but what we do need to do as Europe is to invest more. We need to produce more, also in terms of our industry, in order to be able to defend ourselves and to take more responsibility for our own security. And at this point, we are too reliant on the United States. There are, for example, some strategic capabilities that only the United States can deliver. And we need to make sure that we, as European countries, that we are taking over more of that responsibility. I think it would be good to create a roadmap together with the United States to see how we can take over some of the responsibilities over time. So we can do this in close coordination. And I think it's good that Donald Trump and that President Trump and that the US administration is pushing European countries to do more, because we should take more responsibility ourselves.
And one emerging debate in Europe is also about sharing nuclear weapons. The French have offered to share their nuclear arsenal, and there is talk of the Brits also possibly pitching in. The Germans and the Poland say they're open to hosting these French and British nukes. Is that something the Netherlands is also open to?
I think it's good that this discussion is now starting in Europe. It's good that, for example, President Macron has raised this issue, because over the last 30 years, I don't think we had an open conversation about this. My generation, I grew up after the Cold War, so this is not part of our vocabulary anymore. When I grew up, 9/11 was of course a big event. The terrorist attacks that happened also in Europe and in the Netherlands as well had a major influence on our security perception, and you don't need nuclear weapons against terrorists. So this was not part of the conversation. I think it's good now that this issue is raised now and that we have a conversation about this. I think that in the end we will, the United States needs to be involved. We cannot create a nuclear umbrella ourselves unless we invest heavily in nuclear weapons. And of course we are still in favor of non-proliferation. So I don't see this happening that the UK and France and others are taking over the responsibility completely. But we can see if there is more that others can do. Take, for example, the Netherlands. We have F-35 fighter jets. They are nuclear capable, so our F-35s can carry nuclear weapons. We were the first in Europe which has been able to do that. And those can also be ways to share the burden. But we always need to have the United States on board to maintain our nuclear umbrella.
Just a final question on Ukraine. With the way the peace talks are going right now, do you see a scenario in which this war can be ended without Ukraine making any concessions, whether it's about neutrality or the land that's been occupied by Russia? Do you think that's a realistic scenario right now?
If you look at the battlefield, unfortunately, that is, I don't think that's realistic. I think to some degree concessions need to be made because at this point we see that Russia has a stronger position on the battlefield. So what we need to do is to make sure that Ukraine is getting into a stronger position by supporting them militarily and also helping them with robust security guarantees. And we should try to weaken Russia by putting sanctions, more sanctions, enforcing those sanctions, and by other ways of pressuring them. And then I hope that there can be an outcome of a diplomatic process which is a good deal, a strong deal, which provides robust security to Europe and does not lay the ground for any future aggression. Because if Russian aggression is rewarded now, we know one thing for sure, that Putin will not stop and that his ambitions will go further in Ukraine, but also in other parts of Europe. And we need to prevent that. So what we need is peace through strength, robust security guarantees, and not rewarding Russian aggression.
Thank you so much, Minister, for speaking to Firstpost.
And we end today with Elon Musk. This time the buzz is all about the return of his infamous Hitler haircut. Musk recently posted a picture of his fresh trim on his social media platform X, which went viral with more than 100 million views. And just like that, the Musk Nazi controversy took over the internet once again. Here's a story with more.
Tech billionaire Elon Musk is at it again, sparking buzz and breaking the internet. And this time, it's all about his haircut. Over the weekend, Musk sent social media into a frenzy after he posted this picture on X. The image features the 53-year-old Tesla CEO alongside his 4-year-old son, X. It goes by the caption, "Going back to this haircut." Which haircut? Well, he didn't really say. Still, for many, it rings a bell. Musk's throwback trim comes just days after old photos of a similar style set the internet on fire. His look reminded many of Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. This quote-unquote Hitler-esque haircut was soon linked to another infamous Musk moment. His one-armed gesture that was made during US President Donald Trump's inauguration celebration back in January.
My heart goes out to you.
A gesture that looked way too much like a Nazi salute and gained plenty of backlash. Musk later clarified and even apologized that his actions were not meant to endorse any form of hate or ideology. But that didn't stop the chatter about his alleged Nazi affinity. Just 2 days ago, he stoked the flames again, reposting that Hitler himself wasn't responsible for mass killings, but his public sector workers were. The post was later deleted, however, the controversy didn't quell. Now, old pictures of his Nazi haircut are back in circulation, adding fuel to the fire. But it seems to have not bothered the world's richest man at all. In fact, in his own words, Musk is now bringing back the controversial look. And as expected, meme mania has exploded on social media. While some see Hitler vibes in Musk's new look, others think he resembles a Muppet character. For some, he looks like Humpty Dumpty, and for others, the hairstyle is inspired by the Bayeux Tapestry. Some users even dropped a rhyme about a trendy haircut gone horribly wrong, while one user took an ultimate jibe saying Tesla stock isn't the only thing taking a sharp cut lately. Musk's haircut looks like it dropped 50% since December too. Well, the internet never runs out of creative ways to turn any situation into a joke, just like the SpaceX founder who never runs out of ways to steal the spotlight.
That does it for us today. Thanks everyone so much for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching.